This week, now that Donald Trump has won a sizable election victory, public schools and universities are setting time aside to help students cope. School choice still remains overwhelmingly popular with voters, yet the issue took a drubbing on multiple state ballots. What happened, and how should the school choice movement respond? And many of the country's youngest voters seem to be trending more conservative. You'll hear about one of the national organizations dedicated to achieving that goal. These stories and plenty more on deck this week on The Lion Week in Review. Welcome in to this week's edition of The Lion Week in Review. It's a weekly look at the culture, the courts, your state capitol, and your kids. I'm Chris Stigall. Now, let's meet our panel. Some of the men and women behind the stories at readlion.com. Josh Mann is our managing editor. Michael Ryan, executive editor. And we welcome back Jillian Schneider, staff writer at The Lion. Welcome, panel, as we dive into it. Jillian, we start with you. We've missed you. Glad to have you back. New mom. And you got a story about a judge going after this amnesty proposal of the Biden administration's. What do we know?
Right. So the Biden administration had proposed this plan that was essentially going to grant U.S. citizenship to the spouses or stepchildren or kind of other people otherwise related to American citizens, even though the people in question are illegal immigrants. And so 2 states and I think about 14 state attorney generals sued the Biden administration, saying that this was illegal and unconstitutional, and a federal judge has sided with those states, saying indeed that the Biden administration can't just go around granting U.S. citizenship to illegal immigrants willy-nilly. And I think this is something that a lot of people, even if they're kind of in the center or the left, can agree with, that, you know, even if we have a debate over how open the border should be or how many people we should be bringing in every year, we don't want what we have, which is basically wide open borders, people just flooding in completely chaotically, overwhelming the healthcare system, overwhelming the public school system. That's not something the average American is interested in.
Michael, you get the sense that Tom Homan, who the Trump transition team has already appointed as their immigration and border czar, you get the sense he's not messing around on this issue from what he said.
No, there's a new sheriff in town, and in fact, reports indicate that the migrant caravan that was headed for the U.S. Was cut down by about half, just because of Trump's election. You know, amnesty, number one, is a decision for Congress. It's not a decision for the president. It's kind of like student loans, right? Student loan forgiveness, contrary to all appearances from the Biden administration, that is not an executive decision. Biden's executive orders reopened the border. They actually flew illegals in. They flew them all over the U.S., bust them all over the U.S., often in the dead of night. They put them up in facilities that are not open to the public. We don't know what's going on. Absolute secrecy. Now they want to naturalize them without any legal process, without any assimilation. This is not democracy if you're keeping score. And, it just seems like these are the biggest human traffickers on the planet.
You know, Josh, one of the things that obviously we talk about a lot on this show and at readlion.com is the subject of education. And this issue has really impacted public schools. You've had an influx of migrant children, maybe through no fault of their own, that are here, don't speak English, and are now something many public school teachers have to deal with.
Yeah, and most of these students are learning English as a second language. And so the fact is that students who come in with those kinds of learning needs are more expensive to educate. It's more difficult for teachers and classrooms. And so a lot of school districts are bearing the brunt of this, and they're already facing declining enrollment. And so it puts a huge burden on the public school system, and it becomes even more costly.
Michael, we turn to you on what has been an interesting week and change since the election of Donald Trump as president-elect in a pretty decisive fashion. It has led to many, many colleges, public universities, public schools, trying to cope with the outcome.
Yeah, this is a result of politics in the classroom. My only recollection of politics in the classroom was when the nuns at St. Anne's promoted The Sound of Music. That's as bad as it got for me. But now it's gotten intolerable. I mean, these are not leftist factories where you turn out leftists with your tax dollars. A 17-year-old was removed from a school after posting a list on a school bulletin board of 8 names, some of whom were students. The team marked the list as Trump supporters, asking people to kill them. So that's the effect of this kind of seeping in of politics. A California teacher was recorded calling Trump voters, quote, losers and fake Christians, and claiming Trump would rape his daughter and nieces. The left's rhetoric has really seeped deep into education at every level from kindergarten to universities. You leave your politics at the door, for goodness sakes.
Jillian, the rhetoric has been around for a while now. In terms of the demographic breakdown of this election, it was notable that younger women, college-educated women, single women, unmarried women without families overwhelmingly voted for Kamala Harris. Much of the social media reaction out there has been from young unmarried women shaving their head, pledging to abstain from sex with their men. What's your perspective on that? And the decisive win by Trump, does that mute this a little bit or negate it or make it seem a little, what do you want to say, over the top?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I don't have the breakdown of the exact statistics in front of me, but I think the general sense was that Trump overperformed with a lot of demographics that he wasn't expected to do well in, whether that was people of certain ethnicities or, women or single women, whatever it may be. And so, yeah, we're seeing this kind of obviously overblown and very dramatic reaction. And part of me wonders if people are just honestly doing that for attention, that maybe they are, just kind of drawing up these fake emotions and making a big deal out of something that they wouldn't do that if there wasn't a camera pointing at them. And I think the other part, though, is in so much as some of those reactions are sincere and we do see people who are genuinely having what seems to be a complete mental breakdown, we're observing people who have bought into the Democrat and the left wing's rhetoric that Trump is essentially Orange Hitler, that he's going to take away rights and do all sorts of horrible things that, I don't think anybody sincerely believes he's going to do, but some of these people actually do think it. And so for them, this is, the end of the world. And I think that they've just been, whether they're gullible or willfully ignorant or just kind of putting on a show, I think it's really sad, but I think they're doing themselves a disservice by taking it to this extreme and behaving as irrationally as they are. Yeah,
and I really have to wonder, this week as we record this, Donald Trump returns to Washington, D.C. He sits down with Joe Biden and Jill Biden, and after all that rhetoric about Hitler and fascist and whatnot there, he sits shaking hands and talking politely in the White House again. It seems like maybe that wasn't as sincere as first charged. Josh, speaking of the election, across the country on many state ballots were questions about school choice. And quite frankly, save a few, it didn't go so well for the pro-school choice movement on its face.
Yeah, 3 ballot initiatives failed in 3 states. And we've got a little bit more. We've covered this in a couple of different ways over the last week. And our latest story dives in a little bit and leans on a Forbes writer who points out some important factors that went into each election. And so the states are Kentucky, Nebraska, and Colorado. Kentucky was where it fared the worst. Basically, voters had the opportunity to approve a constitutional amendment that would pave the way for school choice, that would just make it a little bit easier to implement there. But the anti-school choice movement outspent those in support of it 3-1, and that had an effect on the outcome there. In Nebraska, voters voted to repeal a very small school choice program. The pro-repeal effort outspent the pro-school choice movement 5-1. And then in Colorado, the writer suspects that there was some voter fatigue at play. Colorado hadn't had as many ballot initiatives or ballot measures on a ballot since 1914, and so it was a historically enormous ballot for those voters to face. And so for all of these reasons and maybe a few others, school choice just didn't fare well. And the big takeaway from the author McShane was, if you're going to go for school choice, go big, because it doesn't seem to make a difference if it's a little school choice program like in Nebraska or something more significant.
Michael, the leadership of governors when it comes to these issues, I think, really has to matter. And you look to Florida and Ron DeSantis. While school choice was not on the ballot in Florida, the issue of abortion was, and he managed through a pretty aggressive ground game to defeat a pro-abortion amendment in Florida, whereas that issue, like school choice in other states, failed. How crucial, I guess is my question, how crucial is a governor's leadership on these issues?
It could be pivotal. Josh mentioned on our prior podcast, I believe, that states with strong gubernatorial support for school choice do well on that issue. It would also help, in my view, if states with school choice now would share their success stories going forward so that people in other states can see how it works, how well it works. School choice is like any other freedom. The fight for it is really never over. So I guess my advice would be keep the faith and keep the fight.
Jillian, we know school teachers' unions don't like school choice, but parents overwhelmingly do. So one has to conclude it's just a matter of proper and well-financed messaging.
That's absolutely right. I think it's, a matter of time and funding, as with a lot of issues in politics. And I think I understand maybe some voters being wary, especially in Colorado and Kentucky, where constitutional amendments were being presented. And a constitutional amendment is is a monumental thing. It's not something that should be undertaken lightly. And I think, maybe a lot of people are just wary of having their state be a guinea pig, so to speak. There have been, I think, 13 now universal choice programs passed, but only in a couple of years. They haven't really had the chance to stand the test of time, to collect some data, to see some long-term results. And so I wonder if some people are interested in support, but are just kind of wary of being a guinea pig and starting something. And I think personally that in a couple of years, when we have some more test data, when we have some more statistics, there'll be stronger arguments saying, look, this doesn't undermine public education. This isn't going to bankrupt the state. This actually improves test scores for students who leave public schools and for the students who stay in public schools. And I think that will enable school choice to be a lot more successful just a little bit farther down the road.
And Jillian, I'll stay with you because you have a story at readline.com this week on a couple of teachers' unions. We just talked about teachers' unions striking in Massachusetts, and that's deemed illegal as I understand it. What's going on there?
Yeah, so there's two teachers unions, one of them in Beverly, one of them in Gloucester, and then I think a third also started in that North Shore area where these local unions are coming together and striking for a lot of the same reasons that unions always strike for. They want more paid time off, they want higher wages for paraprofessionals, that sort of thing. But of course, what's notable about Massachusetts is Massachusetts, along with about 35 or maybe even closer to 40 other states, actually outlaw teachers' union strikes. And so unions are striking against the law. They've been informed that it's against the law. Often they're fined for behaving in this way, and they don't care. They do it anyway, even though it is difficult for families, it's difficult for students. And it really goes to show that teachers' unions, their job is to represent teachers. Their job isn't even to educate the kids. Their job is to help the teachers. But they don't even really do that. What they're interested in is bargaining, not so that the teachers can get higher wages, but so membership dues can be increased, and all that money ends up being funneled right back into the union. And then oftentimes union money ends up going to Democrat candidates. And so it really shows the perverse incentives of the union structure and how that can be abused to the detriment of students and families and for the benefit really of no one but the unions.
We had a really interesting time here at the Herzog Foundation and our studios last week when Governor Scott Walker, formerly of Wisconsin, visited. He's now the public face of Young America's Foundation, and the Herzog Foundation and YAF, as we call them around here. Josh got together and had some fun.
Yeah, we had about 70 high school seniors from around the country gather for this Faith and Freedom event, or Faith and Nation event. It was a 4-day conference. It was run by the Herzog Foundation in partnership with Young America's Foundation. Speakers did include, as you say, former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, and speakers presented on a number of topics, including Christian leadership in government, the moral case for free market capitalism, as well as the perils of socialism and how to respond to the pro-transgender movement. So it was a great opportunity for these high school seniors to come together with other like-minded young people, but also to be encouraged as they're about to sort of fly the nest and strike out on their own here in the next year or so, to think about how will they be civically engaged and why are these issues so important to our country's future.
Michael, it was a bit of a mixed bag. Speaking of the young vote in this last election, it seems a tide is turning a bit. I know the Gen X generation voted Trump, but young people seem split. Young men in particular seem to be trending more conservative, as Josh was just mentioning some of those issues, particularly of faith and politics. Are we seeing a sea change in the youth vote in this country?
I think there's a coming explosion in conservative values in youth. And the Herzog Foundation and Young America's Foundation got on the train early here with this conference, Faith and Nation. I think it's, let me just brag about the Herzog Foundation for a second. Other than helping people across the country start and grow Christian schools, I think this conference on Faith and Nation is the most important thing Herzog does. And it's only been done once and just last week. The satirical news site Babylon Bee had a video press conference post-election of Satan talking about the election results, and Satan said, "Well, everybody complained that we're after your kids." And he says, "Oh, by the way, we are after your kids," and the culture certainly is. You see the racial and sexual and even political indoctrination in the schools. You see the toxic entertainment media that's out there. You are what you consume. And so this conference comes at a very important time. It's very important right now, more than ever, that we pass on American values. And I think the term faith and nation sums it up pretty nicely.
Jillian, how about this notion of, and I asked you about the ladies voting last week, I'll ask you again about younger ladies voting in particular. They say that younger men trending more conservative, but we've seen that certainly younger women, college-educated women, single women, they seem to be shifting harder to the left. Can that be reversed? Is that something you anticipate could be reversed?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think the statistics show that women, even if they're maybe more liberal in their youth, tend to lean more conservative once they get married. And maybe that's because they take a little bit more awareness of what's going on in the economy or what's going on in education, because they're thinking about children, or they're thinking about, hey, I'd love to be a stay-at-home mom, but can my husband actually earn enough in this economy to support us? And I think, and even for young women nowadays, I think is going to be a super huge issue is all of the LGBTQ stuff, and having men in women's bathrooms and women's sports and all sorts of things like that are really just disgusting to women to have to endure that. And it's happening to children. I've written stories about elementary school students and middle school students who are told, girls who are being made to sleep in the same bed as a male student because they're told that if they don't do that they're discriminating or being hateful. And it's really, really heinous things. And I think women are, if they aren't realizing it yet, I think they're starting to realize that this liberal agenda really isn't for their best interest. And then the best place for them to be really is the conservatives right now, because they're the ones who actually want to protect women and keep them safe.
Yeah, biological males in women's sports and spaces ended up being a much bigger issue than I think many on the left anticipated it would be. Exit polls show that ended up being a much more significant issue for many women than was first thought. So these are stories that we always follow at readline.com. I hope you'll check it out there regularly. But before we close, we always like to go around the horn and ask the panel about their favorite stories of the week at readline.com. Michael, we start with you.
Yeah, I'd say my favorites are the two liberal meltdown stories that we had. This is brainwashing by the media. It's inappropriate politicking in schools at every level. And this really calls for reform in both education and media.
Jillian, how about you?
I got to review a book that was recently written by Kirk Cameron. It's called Born to be Brave, and it's about America's spiritual awakening. And he makes the argument that there's all these cultural stuffs going on, all of these influences that kind of sometimes make Christians despair a little bit of the future of our nation. But he says it shouldn't be that way, that especially as Christians, that we should be taking a stand and fighting not just for the culture, but even to be involved in government. And it's a great read. I highly recommend it, and I enjoyed reading it, and I enjoyed writing a review for it.
Yeah, Kirk Cameron's an impressive guy, and the Brave Books people, I can tell you that I know this, the Herzog Foundation will be doing some interesting work with them in the future that we'll be covering undoubtedly. Josh Mann, your favorite this week?
Well, we have a piece coming out about Donald Trump's appointment of Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to a new department of government called the Department of Government Efficiency. And this might be the most exciting development in the federal government in years, because potentially we can shrink government. And so I'm certainly hopeful, but in any case, it's something that we need to watch and see how they might be able to go line by line through the trillions of dollars we spend in this country. No doubt there's a lot of areas to cut there where we can save taxpayers money.
Yeah, the flurry of news this week, the appointments from the Trump coming administration, and what will undoubtedly be a very busy 4 years ahead. I know you guys are all over it at readlion.com. You want to stay up to date on all the latest breaking news. That's what they do all day, every day at readlion.com. Make sure you watch. And for all of us here at The Lion, until next week, thanks for downloading the show.